So first and foremost, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Occhiogrosso, President and CEO of the Bellingham Regional Chamber of Commerce. And this annual business and housing focused forum is a partnership between a few organizations. So in addition to the Chamber, we have AGC of Washington, we have the Building Industry Association of Whatcom County, we've got the Whatcom County Association of Realtors, and new this year, we have the Whatcom Housing Alliance. So added note, this week, October 17th, is Whatcom Housing Week. So I would encourage all of you to check out the events promoting housing in Whatcom County that's going on this week. You can go to whatcomhousingalliance.org for that information. So just so we're all understanding of how tonight is going to go, we'll just go over a few quick ground rules. First and foremost, this is a forum, not a debate. We're here to know your thoughts as a candidate, not, let's say, your frustration or concern with the other candidate. With that said, there's no planned rebuttals unless I feel someone said something that deserves a rebuttal. So I get that authority to make that decision. We're here to learn about your thoughts on issues impacting business and housing. All candidates receive the questions that we're asking, and our goal is to get as many as possible during the 25 minutes set aside for each race. So that means it's going to be a doozy of an evening. So I appreciate all of you that are here watching the entire thing. And I appreciate all of you that are checking in just for the races that you have the most interest in. We will be showcasing the candidates race by race. And for each race, we're starting with a 3-minute candidate platform. And then in the instance of an incumbent, that person will start. We will then flip-flop who starts each additional question. Each candidate gets 2 minutes for each response to a question. I will be managing the time, so please be aware that I have this little here that I'm repurposing from our networking breakfast of virtual networking breakfast events from during the pandemic. And so if needed, I will be doing this for our candidates. And also, if needed, I will interrupt you as our time is limited and we want to get to as many questions from everyone as possible. This forum is being recorded and will be made available in the coming days. It will be distributed by each partner organization in some way of their choosing, but you will be able to find it online at bellingham.com for your convenience. So, in addition to a number of races on this year's ballot, we do want to acknowledge that there are some proposals, some initiatives on the ballot this election as well. And so each of our 5 partner organizations has its own endorsement process for ballot initiatives and candidates. So check out each organization to see if they've endorsed any of the candidates or any of the ballot initiatives. Out of transparency, I feel it's important since I'm moderating. I want to acknowledge the Chamber has not endorsed any of the candidates, but we have endorsed the Proposition 5 ballot initiative. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions on that. We made the decision, considering this evening is already going to be a long meeting, that we're not addressing any of the ballot initiative as part of the forum. There are opportunities to check that out for more information. So let's get started. I'm going to, let's see, find Deborah. I'm going to hope my Zoom works.
I'm here, Guy. Can you hear me?
Perfect. I can.
Thank you so much for having me. Would you like me to do my 3-minute, Guy?
Yeah, I'm going to promote you as panelists, so then you should be able to be visible on screen too, if you choose. We would love to see you. But yeah, go ahead and get started with your 3 minutes when you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Guy, and thank you all for having me here today. You know, I'm really excited. Last year I ran unopposed. This year I have a young mother out of Cedro-Woolley with a small family who's running, and I really value the fact that we are all Americans. We have an opportunity to run to share our voice, and I'm excited to be able to support another female running for office and providing the opportunity, regardless if you're a Republican or Democrat, right? It's the opportunity to run for office. I'm coming into my 3rd term. I am widely invested in the 40th, from addressing the housing crisis today. Thank you for that conversation that we're sharing. Providing sound environmental practices, but knowing that we need to invest in sound environmental practices that also promote workforce development, jobs, and a strong economy. We are also really excited, and I say we because I work in partnership in both my Republican and my Democratic side, as many of my bills have come through, sharing both ways, coming from a place of finding good common policies that both of my parties can agree to, and both of us can find solutions. I come from a strong background in governmental affairs going on over 20 years now. And that allows me to create stakeholdering tables where if we're going to pass a policy right, we're going to pass a policy that's well stakeholdered by those who support it, those who need to find a way to support it, to include their points and their angles, but also finding a pathway that if the policy isn't right, then let's come back and make a difference. Let's make a change, and let's continue to grow the policy so it impacts all of our communities, all of our Washingtonians, and all of our people here that call this great state home. You all are the very backbone of how our communities succeed and how we're successful and how we have strong economies. Our small businesses rely on you, our workforce rely on you all, our community, our infrastructure. You all are going to be implementing the Inflation Act and the Infrastructure Act. And without all of you, we can't build Washington to be the great state that we want it to be. We won't have homes, we won't have jobs, we will not have the economies, we won't have our school systems, and we won't be able to address those areas that we need that make our rural community the place that we want to be at and raise our children at. I think one of the great things about the 40th is we're still rural. So making sure that our colleagues down in Seattle, and there's many of them, don't lead the policy on how we're going to incorporate laws within our state. Very much, I sit side by side with my Senator, Liz Lovelet, and we pound the table and remind us that from Ferndale, all the way out to Cedro Woolley, all the way out to San Monadins, and down through Skagit and the beloved Whatcom, we are a rural community and we thrive and live on those values. I did it, Guy.
You did it. You like 2:58. So nice job keeping to 3 minutes. So you mentioned housing, and that's going to be a prominent dialogue through tonight's forum. And so you all, as all candidates have received these questions, that's going to be our first question. So I will read it for those who are watching who've not heard it before, and then you will get 2 minutes to answer. So Whatcom County, as well as most of Washington State, is in a housing crisis that demands action, as this has been further exacerbated by rising interest rates and material costs. This crisis is impacting nearly all levels of the workforce, as well as negatively impacting economic development, as it's difficult to attract and retain workforce for firms to expand or relocate to Washington. Please provide details on actions you would propose that would have a positive impact on housing availability and affordability that you would like to address in the legislature.
Thank you for that question. So I'm going to start with the first, I'm going to start with building supplies, and then I'm going to jump into workforce development. Housing supplies is a big conversation that's happening from our builders down to our contractors, all the way down to even our labor unions. We know that there was a bill 1103 that took the EPCs, and rather than using the EPCs as a measurable tool, they were using it as a value tool. I prefer to take a look at that bill, and I'd like to work with the sponsor of the bill to say our building supplies need a uniform approach, and we need to look at the holistic life cycle of the supply and how it's going to apply to the Climate Commitment Act and the carbon sequestration. We know that if we continue to build with the materials and we continue to put policies on our building materials that raise the cost of our supplies, that we're not going to be able to build affordable housing within this state. And we also want to build Washington strong. This means, for me, I love saying the words "buy Washington." I want to make sure that if we're going to buy Washington and buy our supplies from Washington State, that it's affordable, that we have policies, incentives in place to make sure that we can actually provide the materials needed to reach our housing shortage. I'm going to flip over to labor very quickly, Guy, and we might have a labor question here, so I might say this fast. we have a shortage of workforce development that's able to build our homes, our carpenters, our pipe fitters, our steel workers, our electricity, our contractors, et cetera. I'd like to be able to streamline and incorporate more apprenticeships, more funding for apprenticeships, and build more opportunities to bring back the awareness of having our laborers and our contractors going back into school systems from high school, from juniors and seniors, and bringing them back into this world of being able to put your hands to work and build our Washington strong. But again, we can't do it without workforce development. And workforce development means the state legislature should be helping pay for those apprenticeships and putting people to work.
Great, thank you. So, because you mentioned workforce, I'm gonna hopefully get to 2 more questions before we run out of time. But you did mention environment. And so I want to address the environment question, which is a long one. So I'm gonna take a breath and then we'll launch in. We all value and appreciate our natural environment and need to ensure we protect it going forward, as there is clear evidence of our actions negatively impacting our climate. Washington State has taken several actions to cut carbon emissions with the Clean Energy Transformation Act, removing use of fossil fuels to produce electricity. Washington has also looking to phase out the sale of vehicles with internal combustion engines by 2035. This summer and fall, the Washington State Building Code Council is proposing adoption to completely replace natural gas with electric heating sources in all new construction, both residential and commercial. How do you view the impact of these legislative actions on our current infrastructure's ability to meet demands of increased electrical usage and needs? How do you view electrification impacting the cost of living for most citizens and businesses?
Thank you so much. I've got a great bill and we're going to work on it this year. Many of you know that our Western region is the last region that has not adopted a regional transmission operations or organizations. Regional transmission organizations, if we are able to work collaboratively throughout the Northwest, California, Oregon, and Nevada, we're able to develop and manage the electrical marketing and which is the cost of how much our electricity is. So this is really simple. If we're able to create an RTO, this means all of our states will work together. We'll know when we're going to be selling electricity. We'll be able to lower the cost of electricity to the utilities, which at the end of the day lowers the cost of electricity to you and I, Guy. And we know that we're also facing a threat of overloading our grid. So we could actually look at not just 18 days of a shortage that we're looking at, but we could actually potentially look at 30 days. So the long-term idea and concept, remember, I'm Native American, so I'm going 7 generations. We want to make sure that we manage our electrical marketing at the regional level to lower the cost for utilities, which would lower the cost for us at the end of the day, which is taxpayers like you and I.
Okay. You answered that one quickly. So
I've been working on that bill for quite some time. California just offered to open up the marketing to be able to begin the discussion of RTOs. Nevada's opened it up. Oregon and Washington, we're both running behind them right now. It is going to be a historical change in the Northwest. So I'm excited to push forward, and both private and public utilities are already working with me on this.
Great. So final question. Getting back to workforce, and so maybe digging a little bit deeper on one of the topics you mentioned before. But many of the organizations here today are facing a labor shortage, particularly the construction industry, as you mentioned, as it's further complicated by large numbers of craftspeople nearing retirement age. How will you address workforce development to fill open positions in many business sectors, particularly construction, and improve economic opportunities for county residents?
I'm proud to say I've got 2 of those apprenticeships located here in the Skagit, right in Burlington for IBEW and for our carpenters. There are 4 areas that I'm looking to help labor this year, and I've met with the buildings and trade unions, and this would also help our side contractors as well. 1, our contractors and our labor folks need to be able to have apprenticeship programs opened up, and we have an opportunity to be able to expand funding to be able to pay for those apprenticeships and provide support. Because sometimes, right, you not only need to pay for the apprenticeship, but you actually need the tools to be able to show up for it. And many of our folks need help with that funding support. The other is, we talked about with buildings and trade, being able to do pilot projects where you can actually serve and do your apprenticeship while you're serving your time incarcerated. right? We know many of our times our incarcerated come out and walk out that door. They have no job, they have no training, they dump right back into jail. And how much does it cost taxpayers to put people in jail? I'm flipping it around and saying, let's do our apprenticeship while you're serving, like doing on the job. So you leave your incarcerated place, go do your apprenticeship. When you walk out of an incarcerated situation, you should be able to have a job within a buildings and trade area. And not only that, a 1-year housing opportunity where you and your family have housing provided for you. The other is looking at childcare for buildings and trade. We know that we get up and we go to work and we head off to work at 2 or 3 in the morning and we get off at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I don't know about you, Guy, but I haven't found a childcare that's open up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. That hinders our mom and our dad from working. So you only have one source of funding coming in, depending on which parent's staying home. We need that demographic of our communities fully working and engaged, be able to help us retain the jobs and the workforce that we need. But this also, without the workforce development, again, we can't implement the Inflation Act nor the Infrastructure Act. And we want to put people to work in Washington for the next 10 years, building Washington as Washingtonians.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so it's time that we switch over to, I would say, your counter position in the 40th. So we're going to take a moment and promote Alex and Trevor into the panelist mode. And Deborah, thank you so much for your service to our community, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Now go ahead and sign off. Have a great evening, folks.
All right, Alex and Trevor, you both should have received an invitation to promote to panelists. Looks like you're both here. And as I mentioned in the ground rules, in an instance where we have an incumbent gets to go first. So Alex, I will, once we know that Trevor's mic and video is operational, we will begin. Trevor, okay, video, got.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Awesome. So Alex, we're going to start off with the 3-minute campaign platform. Take it away when you're ready.
Well, thanks, guys. And thanks for organizing this and pulling folks together. Really appreciate the chance to come and talk with folks tonight. So again, my name's Alex Ramel. I'm state representative for the 40th district, running for re-election. I've been in this position now for about 3 years. My background is in working in environmental advocacy and relevant to the conversation around contractors and housing. Part of that background includes starting and helping to organize the Community Energy Challenge, program that puts contractors to work doing energy efficiency retrofits, at this point in thousands of homes and small businesses around the region. My background also includes serving on the board of Colshan Community Land Trust, helping to build homes and keep them affordable. And I come to this job with real life experience as a single parent, dealing with the things that many of us in Bellingham struggle with: cost of housing, cost of living, and all of those related challenges. In the legislature, I have focused on a few key areas. On the Transportation Committee. Our community really needs a voice for the ferry service, so have plugged in there. I'm on the Finance Committee, where we look at tax policy, and there I'm really focused on 2 things. One is figuring out how do we rebalance our unfair and upside down tax code. And the other thing that I'm able to plug in there is figuring out ways that we can provide tax incentives to build more homes and keep them affordable. And finally, I'm on the Energy and Environment Committee, which is a place where we get to work on solutions to some of our toughest challenges, like the climate crisis. I also serve as Deputy Majority Whip and as a member of the leadership team. And in short, what that means is that I'm one of a small group of people that helps advise the Speaker of the House and the rest of the leadership group on the big issues that are facing our caucus and facing our state. Proud to be able to bring this community's voice into that room. And I would just say that part of the way that I've tried to approach doing this job is by building a big table and broad collaboration. Work very closely with Rep Lekanoff and Senator Loveland so that we're coordinating on the priorities for this community. But we've expanded that to bring in other representatives from around the region, folks who are not part of the Seattle contingent, and making sure that our voices are amplifying and that we're working together for the priorities in the region. And I will just end by saying I love this job. It's an opportunity to give back to a community that's given so much to me and my family, and appreciate the support we've seen in this election so far. Thanks for having us here.
Thank you for being here. Trevor, you're up. So get started whenever you're ready. 3 minutes.
Okay. First off, thanks for having me here. So my name is Trevor Smith, and I apologize. I'm doing this from work. I'm still at work. So this is my lunch break. Let's see. So I've lived in the 40th and the 42nd district since 1984. I'm a labor rep is my day job, and political director. I am invested in this community and invested in the people that live in the 40th. It's an interesting thing running for office, as Alex well knows. I have a whole lot of things that I think, but as far as policies go, I've been involved in Whatcom County policies, been involved in Skagit County policies, and working on policies at the state level, as far as writing some and tweaking some of the language that's gone forward at the state. Been doing this for about 7-8 years now, and yeah, look forward to the rest of the evening. I'm going to keep this relatively short, guy.
Okay. Love when candidates keep me on my toes. So considering it is housing week, want to do an extra plug there. We're going to lead off with a housing question, and as mentioned during the ground rules, if you will, we're going to flip-flop. So Trevor, we're going to start with you with the housing question, and I will read that once again for everybody that might be tuning in just for this particular race, in case they did not hear it before. Whatcom County, as well as most of Washington State, is in a housing crisis that demands action, as this has been further exacerbated with rising interest rates and material costs. This crisis is impacting nearly all levels of the workforce, as well as negatively impacting economic development, as it's difficult to attract and retain workforce for firms to expand or relocate to Washington. Please provide details on actions you would propose that would make a positive impact on housing availability and affordability that you would address in the legislature. Trevor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Okay. So thanks for the question. As far as policies that I would like to see enacted, I would like to see a stabilized land use language, right? So we know where we're building and where we can build, and that we're building long term. I definitely agree with what Rep Lekanoff was talking about with the Washington Strong, using made in Washington or made in America materials as a promoted way of doing business, and giving incentives and breaks in order to offset any costs for those. I definitely agree that I hear this a lot about housing and having housing availability, whether it's affordable housing or workforce housing. I think that there needs to be a focus on both. And I think that we can do a lot of the affordable housing through private investment, partnering, public-private partnerships in order to build those, such as what's being done in Bellingham. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and we just got to figure out the zoning and then stabilize the building code so that the builders are going in and they know what to expect when they're bidding a project and a project is proposed. So I think there's things we can do there, and I have some other pieces that I would like to see, specifically around the stabilizing the building code. I love the idea of building to the highest standard, but the standard needs to be set, and then everybody knows what they're building to. So I'd like to see some stability moving forward in that.
Okay, great, thank you. Alex, same question.
Great, thanks, Guy. So I guess I would just start off and say, if you really want to understand how the housing crisis is playing out, go out and talk to a couple of thousand of your neighbors and ask them what matters to them and what's on their minds. Folks are experiencing the housing crisis in deep and real ways. It's hurting people in our community. The stories you will hear are heartbreaking and hard. We have to act. There's no one big solution to this one. It's a multifaceted problem, but I'll outline a few of the big pieces. We need supply. We don't have enough homes relative to the ratio of the number of homes to people in Washington. We need to build more housing and increase supply. We have, and what we have been building has been predominantly either big single family homes or more remote multifamily housing. And what we're missing is what used to be a stable, reliable, and often affordable housing form, what we call missing middle. That's row houses, townhouses, condominiums, duplexes, triplexes. So we need to allow more housing forms in more places, in more of our cities. And that needs to be a priority this coming year. This last session, I was helped pass an update to our multifamily housing tax exemption. It's a step in that direction, but we need to do more there. We also have to recognize that there's never going to be enough housing at a market rate to bring the costs down to be able to support everyone who needs a home. And I believe housing is a human right. So we need to be ready to subsidize housing and make sure some units are kept affordable. We do that in Washington through the Housing Trust Fund. We've made historic investments in that over the last couple of years. We've got a lot more to do. And I will say the last thing is we need to provide stability, especially for the rental marketplace. I was proud to help support rental assistance over the last couple of years. More to do there.
Thank you. Next question, and we'll start with Alex this time, is going to be on the economy. The U.S. has seen inflation rates that we haven't experienced in over 40 years. While the state legislature can't implement fiscal policy to potentially reduce its impact on our citizens and businesses throughout the state, what potential actions could be made in Olympia do you feel that could help lessen the financial burden on families and businesses in Washington and Whatcom County? And so Alex will again start 2 minutes for you.
Sure, thanks. Another critical question and another one that comes up at doors all the time. I mean, I guess I would start off and just reiterate that the way that the cost of living increase is hitting people is through the biggest line items in our budgets, right? And so for most of us, that's our housing cost, whether it's rent or mortgage. Everything we do to address the housing crisis is part of the solution to this question. On top of that, the other big thing that we need to do is to right our upside down tax code. We have an unfair and unjust system that charges the people at the bottom the largest percentage of their incomes, and people at the top pay the lowest percentage of their incomes in state and local taxes. That's not fair, and it's not right. So over the last session, we've worked to implement a working families tax credit. Those checks will start going out next year. And we passed capital gains excise tax that, again, will go into effect pending good court decisions, will go into effect, and that money is going to start go into supporting our schools, which gets to this third part of the answer, which is we need to adjust our reimbursement rates. Big sectors like childcare, like healthcare, are very dependent on reimbursement rates that the state sets for Medicare, Medicaid, ECAP, and childcare. And those reimbursement rates basically determine what businesses are able to pay their workforce and how many folks they're able to serve in those sectors. And whether they're able to serve low-income folks in those sectors. So we need to get those reimbursement rates right based on the fact that our cost of living has skyrocketed. So those are a few of the big pieces.
Wonderful. Trevor, same question. 2 minutes.
Okay, that's a big question. I agree. And I think that Alex hit a good point on the reimbursement rates. As far as what we could do for the rest of this, we already do a lot of work through the state, through economic development, through state and local as far as trying to offset some of the costs that businesses wind up passing on to consumers. Like to see some more conversation around how we work with that and how we make that work better, so that at the end of the day, people need to have jobs, need to have living wages, and that means we need to have businesses. As far as stabilizing mortgages and the interest, at that point, I'm not exactly sure what we could do at the state level that would stop what is going on with inflation right now. As far as the rest of it goes, so stabilizing some of it through the workforce development, for making it so businesses don't have to pass through near as many costs to the consumers. That's going to stabilize a little bit on the consumer side, and then it's going to allow them to continue to employ and to grow their workforces, and that's going to lend at least the supply side about keeping people actually working, which is going to help in the long term. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of anxiety around this. Alex is right. When you're at the doors, there's a lot of anxiety around what's going to happen with mortgages, what's going to happen with interest rates, what's going to happen to the cost of consumables. Everybody's seen massive increases, whether it's fuel, food, housing, all of it at once. And that's something that I know that there's some work at the federal level that's being looked at, and hopefully that's going to make a difference. As far as state level policies, I'm not exactly sure, because I'm good, guy.
Okay. So next question, we're going to dive into public safety, and Trevor, you'll kick us off after I finish reading the question.
Gotcha.
A large number of our members are all reporting significantly increased incidents of crime at their businesses and job sites over the past 18 to 24 months. Many in our county and state cite the legislative actions over the past couple of years to address police reform has led to the current situation we are experiencing. As our representative in Olympia, what would you view as the top issues to address and/or change to improve public safety and reduce crime? How do you view the Washington State Supreme Court's Blake decision that ruled that felony drug possession law unconstitutional, and its impact on crime and homelessness issues?
All right. Yeah. In the neighborhood that I live in, I mean, in the last year and a half, crime has gone up around 300% as far as property crime goes. We've been dealing with a lot of different job site issues around crime. Yeah, there's a lot of issues in this. So taking it from the top. So the first one would be how would I deal with the increase in property crime and violence? So I think that there needs to be a restructure. There was a law passed through the state legislature to change the way that policing is done, and it was done with good intentions. However, what we've resulted in is that we now have an issue where cops are unable to enforce the laws that we do have on the books. So I think that we need to sit down and we need to figure out with the police what is going to fix the issues that we have, allow them to still do their jobs, which is protecting you and I and the public at large, protect our properties, and being the people that we can rely upon to call when something does go wrong. So I think that does need to be reworked. There's got to be a happy medium here somewhere where the police are still able to enforce the laws and not be overbearing. And luckily, like in Bellingham or in Skagit County, we don't have a lot of the issues that we see in the rest of the country as far as the issues around policing, and would like to keep it that way. Definitely there needs to be rules, but there's got to be a way that we can still enforce the laws and make it so that that criminals don't kind of get a free pass, which is a lot of what we hear right now. This came up a lot going to doors. Everybody is concerned about this. So there's got to be a way to do this. As far as the Blake decision goes, the Blake decision makes it so that basically anything under 1.5 ounces is not a felony possession. I would like to see some of that changed as far as what types of drugs are decriminalized versus what isn't. I think marijuana should be decriminalized, but I have issues around some of the stronger drugs around fentanyl, stuff like that still needs to be criminalized. I'll stop now, guy.
Okay, thank you. Alex, same question.
Thanks, Guy. So I'll start off and just say, everybody deserves to be safe and feel safe in our community. And I will also say that, there's a lot of finger pointing and challenges and some efforts to politicize public safety in a way that I think is unhelpful. The truth is that crime is up across the country in red states and in blue states. We talked to some sociologists about what underlies that, but it's a problem across the country. But there are some things that we can and should be doing here locally that are productive. And I'd start off by saying we have to invest in treatment and recovery. The legislature has done more of that in the last few years than we've ever done before. We have more to do. But things like the GRACE program, the LEAD program, the Recovery Navigator program, to help people get back on their feet, to have a unarmed response to people who are in crisis. Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to be prioritizing. There was research that was done a few years back that found that most people, more than half of folks who are struggling with addiction want to get help, or at least report that they want to get help. But only 11% of them could tell you how to go about getting help or felt like it had been offered to them. Before we turn to criminalization and felonies, we need to give people a chance to get better. So with regards to bike decision, I can support a misdemeanor, maybe a gross misdemeanor, to give people incentive to get back on their feet. But felonies ruin lives and live with you forever. We also need to be investing in our court system. Whatcom County has fewer courts per capita than most of the rest of the state. We need to invest in police training. We've done more than doubled that, but we need to do even more, including regionalization of police training. And we need a right-sized jail here in Whatcom County. One of the biggest challenges with policing is that police have nowhere to put folks. And so we're not able to enforce laws because there's nowhere to put them in the jails. So thanks.
Thank you. So we are really close to our transition time. So instead of launching into either the other two questions, which will take me about 2 minutes to read, we're going to do something a little off the cuff and just do kind of a 90-second closing final thoughts. Are there things that you wanted to get out there that we didn't ask? And so we're just going to do a 90-second thing, and Alex, we'll have you go first.
Do the best I can. Guy, I was really hoping you were going to ask the same question on environment that you asked Rep Lekanoff. And what I just want to say on that point, a few things. One is that anyone who's been outside today knows that the costs of inaction on climate change are greater than the costs of action. The three measures that you mentioned, I support all three of them. Our electric utilities, Puget Sound Energy said that they're able to decommission and move off of gas electricity by 2045. They supported that bill. Our electric company supported the bill. In terms of vehicle electrification, we passed a goal a year after GM passed an even more aggressive goal, not selling new internal combustion cars by 2035. So those are measures that make sense, that will bring down costs for consumers, and I think are clearly indicated based on the climate crisis that we're experiencing right now. And the evaluation that they're going to bring down costs for consumers was done. Found that folks are going to save about $700 a year by moving to clean electric sources for our heat, our hot water, for transportation. And that was done before Russia invaded Ukraine. And we know that those costs have gone up for fossil fuels since then. So sorry we didn't get a chance to go into the details on that one, but just wanted to make sure the record was clear on a few things. Thanks so much for the chance to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Trevor, 90 seconds, closing thoughts.
Perfect. Same thing. I kind of wish we had gotten into the environmental question. So I do want to say a little bit about that. I mean, I certainly agree that climate change isn't coming. It's actually here. And one of the things I think that I would like to see us do at the state level is do further investment in an all the above energy strategy. If we're going to get off carbon, and we need to, then we have to invest in the infrastructure to do so. And that means not only wind and solar, but that means tidal and hydrogen, blue hydrogen and green hydrogen, not gray hydrogen. but blue and green. We have options, we have things that we can do, and then not on, and actually also nuclear as well. So those are another thing that we could do with workforce development as far as local hire and upgrading our infrastructure and our grid. Because in order to do the things like meet the 2035 schedule for getting internal combustion cars off the road, then we need to invest into the grid and into the charging capacity to make it more widespread, make it something that everybody has access to and that is going to be achievable and usable. Right now, it's kind of an ad hoc, and part of the reason that it's an ad hoc system right now is because we're having a hard time, or at least our cities and municipalities are having a hard time getting the chargers here and getting them installed. So there's issues around workforce development that we can address through registered apprenticeships, through local hire requirements, making it so that there's good jobs, good paying jobs in the towns and cities where people live. And I'll sum it up with, I really appreciate the time tonight, and thanks for having us.
Thank you both. Okay. And so we will now promote Joe and Dan into the room as panelists.
Hey, Guy, can you hear me?
I can.
Great.
Let's see here. Make sure we get the screen correct. All right.
Good evening, Guy. How are you?
Good. Ooh, I hear you really well. Someone's got
Perfect. Is it too hot?
No, not at all.
All right.
Not at all. Great. Okay, we got audio, visual on both. And in this situation, since there is no incumbent in this race, I'm actually not sure how Lance with AGC came up, but we're going to go with the order that you two received. And so Joe will be first. And again, just the same ground rules as before, a 3-minute kind of campaign platform. And Joe, you can go whenever you're ready.
Great. And thanks, Guy. And just so, like before, you're going to give the sign with 10 seconds. Is that right? For all the questions? Cool.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. It's a real pleasure. We've done a number of these forums, and I think that they are always a really good opportunity and really important as to our democratic process, so voters can get a sense of candidates and where we are on issues and things that we care about. A bit about myself. I'm Joe Timmons, obviously. I'm running for the open house seat here in the 42nd Legislative District. I grew up in a working class household here in Washington State. My dad's a pipe fitter, and my folks created a small business out of our garage when I was 5 years old, a mechanical contracting company that's still in operation today in South King County. So I really learned the value of hard work that way, and I've applied that to a career in public service. I've spent the last decade working at the local, state, and federal levels of government, including the last nearly 8 years directly working with leaders in Olympia. I currently serve in the governor's office as a Northwest Washington regional representative, where I represent the local, the state to local communities throughout Whatcom and neighboring counties. And I previously worked at Western Washington University for 4 years, advocating on behalf of the university in Olympia during 4 legislative sessions, helped accomplish things such as lowering tuition while keeping the university whole, bringing capital construction dollars to campus, which not only, of course, help meet growing student needs, but stimulate the local economy, and getting funding for student support services, wraparound services like tutoring, academic tutoring, and mental health counseling and advising that help students be successful. That's my way of saying I really understand how Olympia works. I've been walking this walk down there and with leaders down there for a number of years, and I think that I have a track record of bringing resources from Olympia back to our community, and that I hope to carry that with me when I get the chance to serve next year. That's a bit about myself, my qualifications, but that's not why I'm running. I'm running because I love Whatcom County. I'm running because I think everybody deserves a roof over their head, and that everybody deserves to work, to live where they work and play, that everyone deserves to feel safe in our community, that everybody deserves a great education from early learning through higher education, and that includes career and technical education in high school, as well as a great community and technical education system here in Washington State as well. You know, I love Whatcom County. As I said, my wife grew up here. We're thrilled to have set down roots here. We bought a house last year as first-time homeowners, but that's after our rent went up 35% last year here in Whatcom County. $600 a month with a 1-year-old at the time, and where my wife and I are both working. My wife works in public health. So that's a lens that I'd really look through down in Olympia, is what working class families are going through right now. And I know that a lot of working class families are having a hard time, and it's something that I'd really be committed to working on their behalf and accomplishing great things for our community down in Olympia. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. Dan? Perfect. 3 minutes, actually before that, because again, I forgot to introduce the race. So this is the 42nd District, position 2. So again, I missed that before that. So Dan, 3 minutes to you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be a part of this forum here today. I am Dan Johnson, running for House Rep position 2. I have lived in Whatcom County for over 42 years. And I did serve 4 years in the United States Marine Corps from 1993 to 97. I was in a career of towing and recovery for 23 years until I sold my business in 2019. And I served while as a tow operator, the president of the Towing and Recovery Association of Washington, but was also a legislative committee chair. And during that time as a committee chair, I worked on workplace safety legislation like the enhanced slow down, move over law. And I wrote DUI legislation, which is known as Haley's Law, which was done in the wake of a tragic event that occurred right here in Whatcom County. I've negotiated with state agencies like the Washington State Patrol, the Department of Labor and Industries, Department of Revenue, and the Department of Licensing. And I did all these things as a citizen and a business owner. And I did that over the course of 23 years as a citizen and business owner. So I also know how Olympia works, having written and passed legislation myself. Public safety is something that's on the top of everybody's mind. And, with the overwhelming police reform that we've seen in the last couple of years, I would be interested in ensure that the police have the tools that they need to properly serve and protect. And I have been endorsed by the Whatcom County Sheriff Bill Elfo, retired police chief of Bellingham Flo Simon, and the Washington Council of Police and Sheriffs. With regards to the economy, yeah, we've seen inflation. We've seen $15 billion tax surplus. That's none of it came back to us as taxpayers, and that's a problem. And in fact, I have solutions that would lower some of the taxes and give immediate relief to us as citizens right away. It's also worth mentioning that I've been endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Business, the Association of Washington Businesses, countless local business owners, and Port Commissioner Ken Bell. And one of the things we're going to be talking about today too, but that I'm really passionate about, is housing. The affordability, availability, and the buildability. And, what does the infrastructure look like in our county? And how is the GMA, the Growth Management Act, really hamstringing some of the buildability in the 42nd District and in Washington State in general? And I think that we should go back and look at the GMA, and it's over 30 years old, and readdress it. And moving forward, implement all of the Growth Management Act, not just certain portions of it. Thank you for the 10 seconds. I am good guy.
Okay. Well, speaking of housing, I think we're going to just do this as a trend, since it's a business and housing discussion. And quite honestly, I'm tired of talking about housing in our world over the last 5, 6, 10 years. We're going to start with that. So same question we've asked before, but for those that may be tuning in, I will read the question and both of you will get 2 minutes. Whatcom County, as well as most of Washington State, is in a housing crisis that demands action, as this has been further exacerbated with rising interest rates and material costs. This crisis is impacting nearly all levels of the workforce, as well as negatively impacting economic development, as it is difficult to attract and retain workforce for firms to expand or relocate to Washington. Please provide details on actions you would propose that would have a positive impact on housing availability and affordability that you would address in the legislature. And so per the rules, Dan, you're going to start us off. 2 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Guy. And as we mentioned before, housing is the top of everybody's mind because we all deserve a roof over our head, and that's undisputed, I believe. Basically, we need to stop the bleeding as far as impact fees, permitting fees, and so forth. And a statistic that I have here at the ready is that for every $1,000 in increase to the cost of a house, it prices 2,100 families out of home ownership. And when we're seeing just a constant rise in all of these fees before the first shovelful of dirt is even taken out, people are seeing $50,000 in permitting fees right away. So that needs to get readdressed. And I think that is something that can be readdressed when we take a look at the Growth Management Act. And again, over 30 years old, 13 points in the GMA, but not all of them are equally implemented as by design. But there also needs to be, with availability, there needs to be updated and expanded infrastructure built in smaller towns and communities in the 42nd district to meet the housing needs of the community. Things like the water, sewer, power, and broadband. As people are leaving Bellingham or being pushed out of Bellingham because of lack of buildability and affordability, they're going into our smaller communities, and those smaller communities haven't been given the funding from the state to further support that infrastructure and its building, and therefore they don't have those things set in place when the new homes are needed. And so the I believe the GMAs or the GMUs, all of these acronyms get ahead of me a little bit, but the growth management areas, I think those are the things that we need to start building the infrastructure so that when we do put the houses in there, we can get that affordability in line and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe, same question.
Thanks, Guy. And I first just want to give you a shout out, Guy. You and other economic development leaders, frankly, in our community, as you said, I've heard over and over again the need for housing and childcare in our community. So this really isn't just a moral issue to me. I do believe everyone deserves a roof over their head. This absolutely is an economic issue. Businesses are not starting or relocating here because there's not enough workforce housing. And I don't think that that's acceptable for our community. As I said, last year, our rent went up 35% right here in this community. We have a housing shortage crisis. And I believe wholeheartedly in supply and demand economics. And when supply does not keep up with demand, the costs unfortunately go up for everybody. So I really want to work, I think it's important on this issue too, to look at what the state legislature can do versus local governments. When it comes to fees and permitting, I'm committed to working with local governments to try to make it as easy and accessible for folks to develop and for people to build and move in. But I think that we need to be looking at what we can do at the state level as well. To me, some things that I think we can do, we need to be prioritizing density and building in our cities and around transit particularly. I think we need to be looking at city zoning codes. Things like accessory dwelling units, I think, are a good tool in our toolbox. I think things like condos and townhomes are good tools in our toolbox that we need to be incentivizing building at the state level so that we can create more density, which not only builds more units, but of course lowers the cost for people renting and creates more access for first-time home ownership. And that's another thing I want to talk about. We became first-time homeowners last year here in Bellingham, thrilled to set down roots here and be raising a family here near my wife Heather's parents. I think that we need to be creating more access to first-time home ownerships at the state level. Home ownership is a tremendous way to build assets as a family, stop the cycle of poverty. And of course, I think more housing also helps provide a pathway for roofs over heads for people experiencing homelessness as well. Thank you.
Thank you both. So actually a question that we've not yet asked tonight is the childcare question. And so in Whatcom and Skagit counties, there are currently only enough openings for 1/3 of the children, according to Child Care Aware of Washington. Since the pandemic, we have seen a substantial number of childcare facilities close, making it even more difficult for parents to find available and affordable childcare. When parents have challenges accessing childcare, parents must scramble to find alternative options, with some parents leaving the workforce to care for their child or children. This is particularly challenging for women and families of color, further creating inequities. This also becomes a workforce issue for businesses. What would you propose to realistically improve the availability and affordability of childcare in Washington state? And Joe, we'll start with you for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Guy. Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue to something I forgot to mention in the last question, or more accurately, ran out of time to mention. The Housing Trust Fund is a great tool in our toolbox at the state level also that provides more units for our lowest income earners. And we have a couple projects going on in this community right now, one through Mercy Housing, one through the Opportunity Council. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the one through the Opportunity Council, which provides senior housing, also provides childcare at the ground level. So it's the best of both worlds there. So I think that we need to be using tools like the Housing Trust Fund, that when we build housing units, that we look at building more capital projects and facilities where people can engage in childcare for children. This is a personal issue for me. We have a 2-year-old. We've been on waiting lists since he's been born in this community. We've been very fortunate to be able to hodgepodge childcare through a wonderful nanny who's a Western student, and my mother and father-in-law, frankly, but not everybody's as fortunate. And Guy, you said something that really touches to me too. I'm proud to have the endorsement of many labor unions and the State Labor Council. And this comes up in conversations I've had with labor as well, particularly for single parents. It is very difficult if there's not access to childcare for them to be able to have a job, which doesn't do anyone any good. So what do we need to do? I think we need to build more childcare facilities, as I've already talked about. And I think we need to be ramping up our childcare workforce. I think that we need to be utilizing our community and technical colleges in this work, and making sure that people who go into childcare receive an honest wage and a fair wage where they can support, can afford a roof over their head and live in our community as well. I was a preschool teacher before I got into this world of government and politics. I've seen the work that early learning can do in terms of bettering lives of our children and making people more prepared for kindergarten. And that sets them up, of course, for an educational path of success. So I'm fully fully want to work on this issue and committed to doing so in Olympia.
Thank you. Dan, you're up. 2 minutes.
Thanks, Guy. And a very hot topic. Having been a single father myself for several years before my wife and I got married and blended our 2 families, I can basically say the struggle is real, to keep in the vernacular. The thing that we need to look at first is, the pandemic, there was a lot of closures in the childcare, but was it due ultimately to the pandemic, or was there some regulatory issues leading into the pandemic where a lot of these childcare facilities were maybe hanging on by a thread? And then at the last moment, that was like a final straw for them when the pandemic hit. And that's something I'd like to explore too, moving forward. And the way my mind works is in a free market society as well. And, I've been endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Business and the Association of Washington Business. I like to look at business first and entrepreneurism first. And I like to look to the private sector first. And with that, I would like to maybe incentivize businesses in creating childcare facilities at their corporations, so that when they mentioned earlier, somebody has a 2 a.m. to 2 p.m. work schedule, that it's take your child to work, drop them off at a facility located at or within your place of employment. And then you can go and do your job. And at lunch, you can go and you can visit your child or on breaks. And, keeping them closer to each other, I think is a great opportunity. And that is something definitely moving forward that I would like to explore and see if we could implement into the private sector, and increasing not only the availability of the childcare, but keeping the parents close to their children during the day. I just think that it's got a lot of great opportunity there. Thank you.
Okay. On that note, we're going to stick with that similar topic and look at the workforce question. And so, Dan, you'll be first, followed by Joe, 2 minutes apiece after I finish reading the question. Many of the organizations here today are facing a labor shortage, particularly the construction industry, as it's further complicated by large numbers of craftspeople nearing retirement age. How will you address workforce development to fill open positions in many business sectors, particularly construction, and improve economic opportunities for county residents? So Dan, 2 minutes, starting with you.
Thank you very much. So being a small business owner for as many years as I was, and being raised in the family business, I do know that Workforce availability is something that I've seen in decline over the decades. And it's something that does need to be addressed. I know that there are current programs in the high schools right now that do say like a running start type of a program where they can go to a tech school and learn some other things in their juniors and senior years. I would like to implement something, or at least maybe a version of what we have in the military called the ASVAB, and that is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude and Battery Test. And what that does is it gives you an idea of where your strengths and weaknesses are, how your brain works, what you'd be good at, and maybe putting that out in the freshman year of high school, so that moving forward they can kind of go a direction. It's not a requirement to go that direction, but it lets them know where they'd be good at something. And again, getting people out into that private sector, into the workforce, and getting them into the jobs and the trades that make our country run. And some of them may become one day small business owners themselves, and become part of that working class, middle class America, which is what keeps our country rolling. And I will say that there's the largest manufacturer of wrecker bodies in the world is Miller Industries in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And what they've actually done is they've started their own welding college so that they can get folks right out of high school, put them into their welding college, and then get them into the workforce in their business, in their corporation, in the job of making wrecker bodies for the towing industry. And that's that innovative, creative thinking that I like from the private sector that helps keep things going. It helps keep us moving. Thank you.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, Guy, would you mind repeating the question, if you don't mind?
Sure. Many of the organizations here today are facing a labor shortage, particularly the construction industry, as it's further complicated by large numbers of craftspeople nearing retirement age. How will you address workforce development to fill open positions in many business sectors, particularly construction, and improve economic opportunities for county residents? 2 minutes.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Guy. Yeah, this is rightfully so, should be an issue on top of everyone's mind right now. As I said, my dad's a pipe fitter by trade. My dad didn't go to a 4-year college. My mom didn't go to a 4-year college. She was an X-ray technician before leaving that to go do the books for the family company. I think because she didn't want my dad to go to prison, frankly. So I went the 4-year route. My brothers went the 4-year route. Higher education is a beautiful thing, but not everybody, I think, needs to go to a 4-year college in order to have a good job and a good career. So I think that we need to make sure that our high schools have more career and technical education, so that students can go from high school into the field. I think that we need to make sure that our career community and technical colleges like Whatcom Community College and Bellingham Technical College right here have more pathways for students who don't necessarily need to go into a 4-year path. So I think that that's something I really want to work on. Apprenticeships, that model is I think a very great model in terms of getting folks into the workforce, having them earn a living wage along the way while they develop the skills to hit the ground running in the field. But again, it comes back to housing. To me, what's the good of having a workforce that's trained if they have no place to live in our community? That's not going to do us any good here. Businesses are still going to have the same problem of not being able to fill the need, which is more skilled employees. So I want to work on pathway programs through apprenticeships, career and technical education in high schools, et cetera. But I think that we really are missing an opportunity if we don't also focus on housing and childcare, these avenues that prevent workers from being able to live in our community, work in businesses, have a living wage job and a roof over their head as well.
Okay. Well, we are right at 7:05. And so I want to thank both of you for being here today. And we will transition to our next race, which is the Whatcom PUD District 3. So gentlemen, thank you so much for being
Thanks for having us on, Guy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Guy.
All right. Oh. Panelists. Sorry. Of course, technology is giving me grief.
Oh, yeah.
So Jamie, okay, perfect. So once I recognize both of you have video and audio working, we will get going. Jamie, do you have audio?
Yes, I can hear you now. Sorry. I don't know what's going on.
Awesome. So now that we're good on both accounts, welcome so much. Thank you for being here. And again, as both of you, or this position does not have an incumbent, I'm going off what Lance gave me as far as the order goes. And so again, just like every other race we've done, we're going to start off with a 3-minute campaign platform. And I have Eric first. So loading up the little timer here. And so ready when you are.
Great. Thanks, Guy. Appreciate you guys having me here. And Jamie, how you doing? It's good to see you again. My name's Eric Davidson, and I've been involved in community service in Whatcom County for about 12 years now. Several years on my neighborhood committee, 5 years as a chairperson of the Blaine Public Works Committee, and the last 5 years on Blaine City Council. I was elected 5 years ago and got reelected last year. In my time on the Blaine City Council, I spent a lot of time working on upgrading and maintaining the Blaine Public Works and the Blaine Public Utilities. Blaine is very unique in the fact that it has oversight of electrical, sewer, water, and wastewater within the city. So City Council is ultimately responsible for that. This has given me a lot of good experience and a lot of good insight working with complex problems and ongoing issues that affect everybody in the city. I'm also on the board of directors for Whatcom Transportation Association, the WTA, the Tourism Board, and the Finance Committee. And I work with multiple municipalities on these different boards and multiple different organizations. I served 22 years in the Air Force and Air Force Reserves. I've been a business owner and executive level manager. I work full time right now as a registered nurse, and I love that job. So I think my 12 years of experience working with local government, specifically with public works, has given me a great insight on working on the complex problems that face the PUD for the short term and the long term. So I feel this range of experience makes me a well-qualified for the Public Works Commissioner position.
Okay. I was not ready. Nice job. So next up, Jamie, 3 minutes.
Thanks, Guy. My name is Jamie Arnett, and I'm a candidate for Whatcom County PUD Commission. I grew up right here in Whatcom County, where I graduated from Blaine High School and Western Washington University. Most of my professional career has been in nonprofit management, working for Habitat for Humanity in both Washington and Oregon, advocating for housing for low-income families, and at Animals as Natural Therapy, where I'm currently the executive director running a small therapy farm that provides animal-assisted mental and behavioral health services to youth and veterans. Additionally, I've worked as a contract grant writer for more than a decade, helping community-based organizations achieve their financial goals to better serve our community. And I worked as an executive administrator in the commercial fishing industry, an industry that I grew up in, and was appointed to Blaine City Council in 2019. In my opinion, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. My family's lived here in Whatcom County for generations and worked in fishing, farming, and water quality. I understand the delicate balance that must be struck between our heritage industries of fishing and farming to ensure enough water for everyone. As a mother and executive living in a rural community, I can speak to how difficult it was to thrive during the pandemic without access to high-speed internet for school, employment, and telemedicine. For me, it's personal, and I believe that passion leads to policy. My campaign has 3 goals. The first is to bridge the digital divide by securing open access fiber optic internet infrastructure to all of Whatcom County. Our PUD is 2 decades behind in serving our county with the telecommunications that they're authorized to offer. This won't only assist families that have suffered through the pandemic with slow internet while trying to do work and school from home, but will attract more businesses to our area and assist with economic recovery. The second is to provide fair, equitable, and responsible water stewardship. Water is precious, and Whatcom County is facing a number of complex water rights and water quantity issues. And while there's no shortage of technical solutions, it's been really difficult to get all the players to the table to discuss the future of water availability. The third is to provide better communication to the community about what the PUD is able to offer and what your local PUD is currently doing. I often get blank stares when I tell people that I'm running for PUD commission. Part of the reason for that is that our PUD does not offer direct services to the public, and part is because we have no official communication plan or officer. I think that public input is vital to public office, and I think it's also high time that the PUD was not only transparent, but proactively reaching out to our community. Thanks, Guy.
Okay. So first question, I think we'll go to Jamie. And again, just a reminder, 2 minutes per candidate for every question, and we'll flip flop who starts. You started to address this, so maybe you can go into a little bit more depth. First question is, what do you feel is the biggest role and responsibility of the PUD in Whatcom County, and why are you running to accomplish this?
Yeah, so the Whatcom County PUD has the authority to provide water, energy, and telecommunication services to our community. And the commission provides the policy direction for that. Like I said, most Whatcom County residents have no idea what our PUD does. Part of that is because we have no direct services to Whatcom County residents, but also we've fallen decades behind in offering like the telecommunication services that we're authorized to offer. So although bridging the digital divide by securing broadband is my priority infrastructure project, I'd like to say that we should be able to chew gum and walk at the same time, right? So I don't think that there's one role or responsibility in providing energy, water, or telecommunications that overshadows the other, but rather we need to triage those responsibilities. We know that in the future, we're going to have more droughts in the summer and more floods in the winter. We know that without high-speed internet, our communities will struggle to thrive as they did during the pandemic. And we know that we must find balance between our heritage industries of fishing and farming to ensure enough water for everyone. We can let those trials be devastating, or we can plan for the future with our public utility district. I want to do that planning, and which is why I'm running for this office.
Okay. Eric, same question, 2 minutes.
Well, I've got to agree with Jamie on the fact that there's no one single priority, right? We do have to triage everything we have out there, but there's not one thing that's any more important than the other. But I feel like fair and equitable water rights, as well as affordable and accessible high-speed internet for everyone in the county are both high priorities. Fair and equitable water rights for our county is vital for the future. The PUD needs to work together with local municipalities, local tribes, the county council, not only to come to an agreement about water rights, but long-term planning to manage growth, to manage use, to manage conservation, flooding, and having the reserve tanks for times when water flow is low. That's going to be a key to success for Whatcom County, is that long-term planning and getting everybody on the page to understand that that's what's needed. And then during the pandemic, we saw a lack of high-speed internet, and that not only affected our jobs and our households, but our children's ability to keep up in school. The PUDs worked hard to get high-speed internet throughout the county, but more has to be done. So working together with private enterprise, local municipalities, and we've got to get some assistance from Olympia to get some of these far-reaching places taken care of. That'll get us part of the way. But the thing that'll get us the other part of the way is the PUD making it a priority and the people of Whatcom County making it a priority. Because this is a must that we have to have in this county. And I want to be able to make that high-speed internet accessible to everybody. Just because you have low or lower middle income doesn't mean that you shouldn't have access to internet. It should be as accessible as water and electricity.
Okay. Next question. I'm just going to go down the list, since the PUD, and then for everybody watching, the PUD has a completely different set of questions, as they should, than our state legislature. So the Washington State Legislature and many municipalities have enacted laws and ordinances to reduce carbon emissions by eliminating the use of fossil fuels, particularly in the generation of electricity, heating of our buildings, and powering of our cars. Do you believe Washington State is adequately prepared to meet the increased demand for alternative power sources with the removal of fossil fuels as a source of power? What would you propose to avoid the blackouts that California routinely experiences as they have too moved in this direction of elimination of fossil fuels in the production of power. And Eric, we'll start with you for 2 minutes.
Yeah, this is kind of a big deal because California is it's a huge place, and they've been behind the power curve for decades on the way they deal with their energy. And I believe that Washington State, although they're doing better than California certainly is, I honestly don't think that they're prepared to handle the change in their recent legislation. If Washington is going to want to be a leader in eliminating carbon emissions, decreasing use of fossil fuels, and avoiding brownouts and blackouts, it needs to not only invest in new technology, but it has to have the understanding that the advancement of this technology takes time. We also have to have a realistic time frame in which to implement it. We can also get there through small incremental changes. I think people feel like there's a magic bullet that's going to fix everything. The Tesla car is going to be the thing that fixes everything. The windmill is going to be the thing that fixes everything. That's not necessarily true. So as we look toward technology and as we look toward that in a long term, we also need to look at small incremental changes from the state and local level. That includes personal, commercial, and industrial conservation, incentives for individuals and organizations to use the most efficient technology, microgeneration in homes. These things will bring us a long way to our goal, but we have to make sure that we work on several solutions to get there and have the drive to do that. So between conservation at the local level, microgeneration at the local level, incentives at the local level, as well as investing in new technology, these are the things that are going to ultimately get us there. And we need to start that sooner than later.
Okay. Jamie, same question, 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's a complex question. So Washington State generates more electricity from hydropower than any other state, enough to send power to 8 states and parts of Canada. While I don't think that we'll have issues generating enough electricity to meet future demands, including a move towards electric vehicles, I'm worried about aging infrastructure, a lack of EV infrastructure, and also overloading our grid. And what I mean by that is that consumption varies at times. If we're all charging our cars at the same time, or we're all, using our air conditioners at the same time, we can overload our grid, which leads to blackouts. I think the key is building resiliency and focusing on energy storage. My brother's a senior operator at the Grand Coulee Dam. We were recently discussing a potential storage project in the Creston area. And the idea there is to create a reservoir that would use renewables to send piped water to the dam for energy production during periods of high consumption. And the good news is we can actually do some of those kinds of things here locally. Here in Whatcom County, we can generate power through solar, like community solar projects, potentially through wind, biodigestion, and piped water production or storage. We can build a microgrid like the one in Arlington, the focus being on resiliency and emergency preparedness. We also know that emergency preparedness is a big deal, as we witnessed in Texas. And I just have to acknowledge that this is a scary transition, but I'm sitting here, in a Zoom room full of innovators, builders, and business people, and I have faith that we'll be able to rise to meet that future. I feel like in some ways it's a ready or not, here we come. So I'm looking forward to the future.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Next question kind of pings on something both of you have already mentioned, and that is broadband. So the pandemic has clearly pointed out the inadequacy of the availability of broadband in our rural areas throughout Whatcom County. Whatcom County PUD and the Port of Bellingham are partnering to address the issue. Can you share your thoughts and understand as to how the issue is being addressed, how you believe an extension of broadband infrastructure can impact our communities?
Starting with me, Guy.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here in Whatcom County, our PUD has had the authority to bring broadband to rural communities for over 20 years. Their negligence in doing so has allowed our community to suffer in many ways brought to light during the pandemic. We know that not having high-speed internet has disrupted our ability to go to work, to school, and to have telemedicine. What you may not know is that a 2021 Youth Mental Health Advisory put out by the U.S. Surgeon General, it was also noted that youth living in rural communities, like much of our area, suffered poorer mental health outcomes during the pandemic due to a lack of internet access. So this is very serious business. The PUD has the authority and the funding mechanisms to bring us broadband. They must act now. Partnerships will actually go beyond just the port and the PUD, but include other local municipalities if we want to develop a publicly owned fiber optic backbone connecting every part of our county and cities with dig once policies, interlocal agreements, and open access policies that preclude private monopolization of the market. It will also require not one, but several different models in its deployment. For instance, in areas like Blaine or Sumas, where they have municipal electric and already own their infrastructure, it may make sense to provide municipal broadband. Other areas of the county, they might benefit from the local utility district model, which is set up by the PUD. And that's what they're using in Kitsap County with a lot of success. Broadband won't only improve our quality of life here in Whatcom County, but it'll also aid in economic recovery by attracting more businesses. The time's now, and we need to make this a priority.
Okay. Eric, same question.
Yeah, I think everybody in the county deserves to have access to high-speed internet and high-speed internet that they can afford. One of the things I think we overlook sometimes is that it's expensive to do, and it's going to take some time, it's going to take some money, but that shouldn't preclude people in Whatcom County who are in low or low middle incomes from having access to it. So I think that's a huge part of it going forward. I feel like the PUD, they've been working lately on trying to extend high-speed internet, but Jamie's right. They've not been as diligent as they could have in the last 20 years. In the last few years, they've been getting some grants that have been working on this, but we need to do a lot more, and that's going to have to come in a lot of different ways, working with different municipalities, lobbying Olympia, getting private enterprise in to work on this. And Jamie's absolutely right. And there was another question regarding electrical on various municipalities. City of Blaine would be happy to run their own internet service. This would help us go a long way for all the expansion that we're doing. But each part and each corner of the county is going to be dealt with a little differently, but that doesn't mean that we can't, as a group, get there. And it's a high priority for me on the Public Utilities Commission.
Wonderful. So we're going to take the cue that both of you just stated about some municipalization. And so through many of the Climate Action Committee discussions over the past several years, there has been some folks who have advocated for the municipalization of power utilities in Whatcom County. What are your views regarding this, as well as do you feel this would be economically feasible from a consumer standpoint? Eric, we'll start with you, 2 minutes.
Well, I definitely think it's a conversation worth having. I don't think you can say out of the gate that one municipality should control their electrical and another municipality should not. We're having this exact conversation in the city of Blaine right now. It's been something we've been having for months, and it's something we're going to have probably for the next, for a while. It's whether or not to maintain electrical power within the city of Blaine or transfer ownership. Currently, electrical power in the city of Blaine is about 30% cheaper, excuse me, about 30% cheaper than neighboring municipalities. But that doesn't necessarily mean that every local entity having oversight of those municipalities is a good idea. For Blaine, it works really well. We're really happy with it. The fear is that those rates go up 30%, and that can affect our economy as well as the pocketbooks of our constituents and our families in Blaine, our neighbors, right away. So for us, that's something we've got to look at. But for another organization, for another municipality, that may not be what they want to do. To implement it's not just a matter of paying for the copper and paying for the poles. You have to have the organizational infrastructure to maintain it, and you just don't do that overnight. So these conversations have to be held. I'm more than happy for each municipality to have more control. I think local government having control over county, regional, state, federal entities is always best, but in a case-by-case basis, it might not be what's best for that specific municipality. So I'd be more than happy to transfer it to wherever is best for everybody involved.
Okay, thank you. Jamie, same question.
Yeah, I'll preface by saying that I grew up in Blaine, a city where we've had municipal electricity for generations, and it was cheaper and we had better service. I do favor local control of utilities. However, I think we should exercise caution with this sort of undertaking. Jefferson County is the only Washington state community that successfully transitioned from a private to public power model, and it resulted in higher rates and some of the highest base charges in the state, something that could be really hurtful for our most vulnerable community members. I would be supportive of a feasibility study to determine costs and benefits of a transition to public power, but I would want that feasibility study to carefully look at rate impacts, as well as the potential for job creation here in Whatcom County. However, as I stated earlier, I'm excited for the possibility of local renewable energy production and storage in Whatcom County. I think that can give us some of the local control that we want, and it will increase resiliency in our ability to respond to emergencies. It can also be extremely beneficial for lower income families, as is the case for community solar projects. So while it isn't a no to public power for me, it's certainly something I would favor. I just would want us to be really thoughtful in that approach and consider those furthest removed from justice before making a decision.
Okay. Thank you both for your response to that one. Looking at the time, I think we can hit one more. And so the final question goes on a topic that both of you have mentioned, and that's water. And so Whatcom County continues to face issues of accessibility to water. What are your thoughts regarding potential policies and solutions to simplify this process to allow for adequate availability for residential, agricultural, as well as for fish habitat? How do you look to productively collaborate with the Lummi Nation in solving these complex issues?
Yeah, great question. So we are facing a number of complex water rights and quantity issues in Whatcom County, which is further exacerbated by climate change and low in-stream flows in the Nooksack River. Last year, the state legislature allocated funding for Whatcom County to begin the adjudication process. Adjudication is the legal process to resolve conflict and competition on a water source. We're currently in pre-adjudication, meaning that we're inventorying how much water is needed for fish farms and families. When that's finished, a judge will prioritize each individual water right under the law. For water, priority is given on a first in time, first in right basis. However, that can take many years. In Yakima, it actually took 40, which means in the meantime, we should be pursuing alternative solutions to work in conjunction with adjudication. So I like to call it a yes and approach. When discussing water, it's important to note a few things. First, given that water rights are assessed on first in time, first in right basis, local tribes have the first right. Second is the Treaty of Point Elliott guarantees the hunting and fishing rights of tribes, which means we have a legal and moral obligation to ensure enough water in the Nooksack for healthy salmon runs. We also know that farms feed families, so we need to respect the contributions to our community made by the local agricultural industry. So we must find balance. The good news is there's actually no shortage of technical solutions for this. It's just been hard to get players to the table. Some options include having the PUD use their large and senior water right on the main stem of the Nooksack, where in-stream flows are less problematic from a salmon habitat perspective, to help serve ag customers in times of high demand. Other solutions could be to work with a local conservation district to mobilize grant funding for farmers to purchase improved irrigation systems that focus on water conservation, as current systems like irrigation guns often have excessive evaporation and drift. I think the key here moving forward is that we need to be swift and fair and respectful, and that we all need to play by the same rules. Thanks, Guy.
All right. Okay. Eric?
Yeah, I think water access is probably the biggest single issue we have facing our county going forward. we can generate power, we can build sewer systems, but we just can't make water. So we need both a long-term and short-term action to ensure that water accessibility is met. This includes understanding the needs that we have, understanding the needs when we have a shortage of water, when we have too much water, understanding storage, and understanding and an implementation of conservation when it comes to commercial, residential, agricultural, and industrial levels. They're all important. Working with our local municipalities and with our local tribes, while we understand our ability to grow use of our water within Whatcom County, because let's face it, Whatcom County is going to continue to grow. They're going to continue to build houses, and it's going to continue to be a harder and harder thing to manage. So working with our municipalities and our local tribes to pump water, to have access to water, to hold water in reserve when needed. These aren't overnight solutions, but they're things that we all have to have an understanding of and have to deal with on an ongoing basis to address. So working together, bringing everybody to the table, understanding that the needs of everyone to be looked at is important. This can be done within or without adjudication, but it can be done without jeopardizing fish habitats and the agricultural needs that we hold so dear in Whatcom County.
Okay. Thank you both so very much for joining us this evening. And so we're going to transition to our legislative district 42nd or 42, position 1. And so we'll be bumping up Alicia and Tasha into panelist mode. And Eric and Jamie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So both of you are almost on screen, so that's good. Looks like mics are working, right?
Hear me now?
I can.
Perfect. Thank you.
Alicia?
Hi.
Awesome. Okay. So again, just reiteration of ground rules, since Alicia, you are the incumbent. We're going to have you go first with your 3 minutes, followed by Tasha. And I'm going to keep this schedule running. And so with that, Alicia, start us off.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you all for engaging tonight. I'm Alicia Rule. I'm your current state representative running for re-election in the 42nd district. I have been in Washington, in Whatcom County for 5 generations. My family has been here for 5 generations. I'm a lifelong social worker. I'm a small business owner, and I'm also the mother of 3 kids. So I have really enjoyed the honor of serving you in the legislature, and I'm really looking forward to getting back to work. I have been working very hard in both public safety and mental health. I'm a little short on voice, a little smoky today, and have earned the endorsement of the Association of Washington Business, as well as the National Federation of International Business, Independent Business, the Realtors, and many, many labor unions, as well as just a variety of folks that have really trusted me to serve you well, because I listen deeply and I work really hard to see all sides of a policy and ensure that we're working bipartisanly. I have the most bipartisan record in the legislature, and I look forward to getting back to work for you.
Yeah. Okay. Mid-sip. Sorry. Tasha, 3 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for hosting this tonight. My name is Tasha Dykstra Thompson. I'm a 25-year veteran of law enforcement, currently working as a disaster case manager with the flood survivors in primarily Sumas. I'm also a sub bus driver in the community. I grew up here in Whatcom County on a dairy farm just south of Linden. My father, Jake Dykstra, grew up in Holland and immigrated here with the dream of owning his own farm. My mom, Claudette, was a log truck driving singer and a yodeling school bus driver as well. And together they raised 11 of us. Who I am today and the skills I developed and honed during my law enforcement career were first instilled in me by my parents. Growing up on that farm, they taught me if I wanted something, I needed to work for it. Because of my roots in the farming community, I'm very proud of the endorsements I have received from the agricultural community, such as the Washington Dairy Families, Wheat Pack, Potato Pack, Fruit Tree Association, and the Cattlemen's. And I look forward to working with these communities to keep our agricultural community here in the 42nd thriving, because it's a huge economic driver for our district. The experience and talents I developed in my 25 years as law enforcement are very applicable to the skills necessary to be successful in Olympia, such as collaboration and teamwork, ability to read, interpret, apply law and policy, and to communicate effectively with people from all walks of life. Throughout my career as law enforcement officer, I was very active in the agency in multiple ways. In addition to my duties as an officer, detective, corporal, and sergeant, I was also a recruiter for the agency and profession, encouraging young people to join the law enforcement community. I was a peer support and wellness coordinator. Law enforcement, though very rewarding, is also very difficult. We see horrible things people can do to each other, and to successfully complete a career in law enforcement, we have to acknowledge those impacts and effectively process through those traumatic events. I was also very active in community outreach. As the Bellingham Police Association president, I volunteered with Special Olympics Washington. I organized the yearly Shop with Your Cop event at Walmart. I organized a sack lunch event for first responders to give back to their communities when COVID hit. I was also the legislative advocate in Olympia for Bellingham Police Union to the Washington Council of Police and Sheriffs. And so I advocated for and against legislation impacting law enforcement. Throughout my career, when working with a group or committee, the question was never about political affiliation, but rather what was the common goal, to find what united us rather than what divided us. And that diversity in thought prevented tunnel vision, because tunnels, no matter if they are red or blue, can be negative because there's only one way in or one way out. But we do need a way out of the spiking crime rates, and we need a way out of the escalating prices on items that we use every day. And we need to find a way for people to get into the housing market. These are my priorities I want to focus on in Olympia. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. So since housing, you teed that one up perfectly. We're going to kick it off as we have for every legislative race tonight. And so Whatcom County, as well as most of Washington State, is in a housing crisis that demands action, and that has been further exacerbated by rising interest rates and material costs. This crisis is impacting nearly all levels of the workforce, as well as negatively impacting economic development, as it's difficult to attract and retain workforce for firms to expand or relocate to Washington. Please provide details on actions you would propose that would have a positive impact on housing availability and affordability that you would address in the legislature. And Tasha, we'll start with you. 2 minutes.
Thank you. This is a question that is heavy on everybody's minds. I think we need to make meaningful reform to the Growth Management Act. The GMA was implemented in 1990 and has restricted the ability for communities to build. Those restrictions have caused a huge upfront cost to home builders in the permit process. The permitting process is one way that we at the state level can have an immediate impact on the cost of housing. Even now, the Washington State Building Code Council is looking at passing even more stringent residential building codes, which will only add to the unaffordability of housing. Washington is one of 3 states adhering to the 2018 Energy Code, while 80% of the nation abides by 2012 standards. If we're already in one of the top 3 in the nation for strict standards, why are we going to restrict it even further? Rather, what we should be asking is, what regulations can we repeal that drives up the permitting cost? In researching bills that came before the legislature last year that didn't make it through, that I would support, is House Bill 2049. I would work to bring it back to the table and that would have encouraged the construction of affordable housing by cutting out redundancies and streamlining the process of building more homes. I will fight to eliminate these excess fees and redundancies so housing can become more affordable and attainable. Dan Johnson mentioned it earlier, but we need to invest in infrastructure development. The 42nd district is known as a donor district, which means we pay out more to Olympia than what is returned. I will fight to bring as much money as possible for infrastructure projects. As people have moved further out of the urban areas in search of more affordable housing, the infrastructure has struggled to keep pace. So I think it's very important that we continue to invest in our infrastructure. And I'm proud to have the endorsement of 4 small town mayors in the district who believe that I have the ability to do this. I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the Washington Housing Affordability Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alicia, same question, 2 minutes.
Yeah, the cost of housing right now is something that is heavy on all of our hearts, and it's impacting many of us. It's important that we do many things at the same time. There's not going to be one solution. We need to work rapidly. So we do need to build more housing. We need to build different types of housing. I'd like to see condo reform to open that up. I'd also like to make it easier to build housing. And part of that is getting rid of unnecessary regulation. I do work really hard on increasing home ownership opportunities. And one of the things I'm really proud of too is some of the work I've done to ensure that in the Housing Trust Fund, for those who aren't able to necessarily participate in a lot of the ways that would be market housing, is to make sure that that money is secured and protected for those areas outside of King and Pierce in our urban areas. And so I'm proud of that work. I did that last session, and I plan to continue to doing that. Thank you.
Okay. Next question, we're going to focus on environment. And so we all value and appreciate our natural environment and need to ensure we protect it going forward, as there's clear evidence of our actions negatively impacting our climate. Washington State has taken several actions to cut carbon emissions, with the Clean Energy Transformation Act removing the use of fossil fuels to produce electricity. Washington is also looking to phase out the sale of vehicles with internal combustion engines by 2035. This summer and fall, the Washington State Building Code Council is proposing adoption to completely replace natural gas with electric heating sources in all new construction, both residential and commercial. How do you view the impact of these legislative actions on our current infrastructure's ability to meet the demands of increased electrical usage and needs? How do you view electrification impacting cost of living for citizens and businesses? And we will start, Alicia, with you, 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. There's a lot packed into that question, but I think overall what we're looking at is a lot of pressure to move off of fossil fuels and into something that's going to be green and clean and good for our environment. We need to do that, but we need to make sure we do not do that on the backs of the poor. So I am concerned about the impact on those of us who are in, working class houses, as well as our extra vulnerable and extra poor folks. But I also know that we need to continue working rapidly to make sure the infrastructure and the supply chain are available when and where we need it. So I think we need to do multiple things. I think we need to continue to incentivize in the private industries. I believe that as humans, we will continue to innovate and be creative and create new ideas in order to solve this problem. It's not going to be one solution, but we need to continue to incentivize multiple solutions to be able to move forward with healthy, clean air and clean water, but that is also affordable in the midst of this housing affordability crisis, as well as inflation and all the other things that we're experiencing today.
Okay, Tasha, same question, 2 minutes.
Great. I believe to adequately meet the needs of our community, we need to invest in a diverse number of power options. The key is to keep power for communities affordable. As we talked about with housing affordability, when we are restricting to one power source, we are going to drive up some housing costs. And I think that is the opposite of what we need to do in our current environment. I think that to keep it affordable, this is done through diversity of options versus legislating only one way forward. Cheap energy is key for people to thrive, to afford a home, to open a business, or to do whatever activities they enjoy in our community. And like a good stock portfolio, diversity is key to weather the ups and downs. If we put all of our eggs in one basket, we leave people without options to deal with unexpected emergencies. For example, in Sumas, we have not solved the flooding issues. A battery operated car will not work in a flooded town. In Florida, we saw that some Teslas after Hurricane Ian spontaneously combusted and caused large fires. Many of our Sumas residents had to drive through very deep water to get out of their homes before the water took over. And just, this is one of those things where we are only advocating for one source. We're setting ourselves up for some unforeseen, unexpected consequences, such as what we saw with Hurricane Ian. I think encouraging greener energy options versus legislating it will open the door for innovation in our community. Bellingham and the 42nd District are passionate about their green spaces and being outdoors. Opening the door for all ideas will bring out the creativity of this community and encourage the free market to come up with some great ideas in our community. Thank you.
Okay. Next question, and we'll start Tasha. A topic that's probably near and dear to you, and that's public safety. And so a large number of our members are all reporting significantly increased incidences of crime at their businesses and job sites over the past 18 to 24 months. Many in our county and state cite the legislative actions over the past couple of years to address police reform has led to the current situation we are experiencing. As our representative in Olympia, what would you view as the top issues to address and/or change to improve public safety and reduce crime? How do you view the Washington Supreme Court's Blake decision that ruled that felony drug possession law unconstitutional and its impact on crime and homelessness issues? 2 minutes.
Well, I'm going to start with the Blake decision. I think it had a devastating impact on our communities and our safety. I think it's right up there with the legislative police reform laws. It has also led to an escalating rise in overdose deaths, not just among those who deal with addiction issues, but our children who may be experimenting or even accidentally exposed to a substance for the first time that leads to their death. I think that fentanyl should be a felony. It is one pill can kill type of drug, and it's become so accessible. The giving a business card is not effective. You know, we have invested in good rehab or detox and crisis stabilization, but those are only voluntary options. Most of the people that I dealt with in law enforcement were in such a space in their addiction or their mental health that voluntary options did not occur to them. They were in a space that they couldn't make that decision. And so involuntary through arrest, through the jail system, I think we can have a great discussion about on the backside in the reform of how can they get those things off their records. We can improve that when they've made their way through the detox system, and we can work through that so that does not follow them for the rest of their lives. But for that point in time, we need to have those tools to help them get into a place and into a detox or a jail where they could detox and maybe make that decision where they want to go to a voluntary services facility. I think we need to repeal the laws that hamper law enforcement's ability to safely and effectively enforce the laws of this state. The laws must be clear and concise. When I have 2.5 seconds to make a decision, having gray or imprecise language can lead to hesitation, which can lead to harm to the officer or who they are interacting with. We also need to support better policies and empower our officers with better training. I could go on, but I see I have about 2 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia, same question.
Thank you. I like that you started this out with, it's a topic that's near and dear to you, to your heart. This is a topic that's near and dear to all of our hearts. And if it's not, all we have to do is look out our front doors and see that it is literally impacting everyone in our community. And we have an obligation to work quickly and robustly to address this issue. And I should say these issues because there's quite a bit that was, again, in this question, it's talking about the Blake decision, which is something that the legislature will relook at as we go back into session. And I have held for a long time, very consistently, that I do believe that we need to have a criminal element to the simple possession, knowing simple possession of these drugs. That is why I introduced a bill specifically to criminalize at least fentanyl last session, because I believe that it's a compassionate thing to do. As a social worker who's worked with people that are in and out of recovery, I can tell you that the most compassionate thing we can do is to make sure that these laws have enough teeth to get people the help they need. Sometimes that's what it takes, that they need to be able to be in front of a judge and have accountability to be able to get that help they need. We also need to build out those systems. We need to build comprehensive systems that work for people. That means they need to be able to access the treatment that we're requiring them to do. They need to be able to get into those programs. We need to build those out. I'm very proud to say that I was able to secure full funding for a detox center on Lummi Nation. I was also able to secure full funding for an inpatient 32-bed unit in Bellingham. Those things will be built, as well as a way station. I think these social issues that we see intertwine with one another. I'm also very proud that I've earned the endorsement of the Fraternal Order of Police, as well as our former Police Chief Flo Simon and the mental health community, because I know how important it is that we work together to produce solutions that work well for our whole community. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Alicia, a topic near and dear to my heart as your chamber exec is the economy. And so the US has seen inflation rates that we haven't experienced in over 40 years. While the state legislature can't implement fiscal policy to potentially reduce its impact on our citizens and businesses throughout the state, what potential actions could be made in Olympia do you feel can help lessen the financial burden on families and businesses in Washington and Whatcom County? So Alicia, we'll start with you, 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. This is a priority for me as well. As somebody who knows what it's like to struggle to put food on the table, as well as somebody who's worked hard with those who have for the entirety of my professional lifetime as a social worker, I know that there is no safety if there's not security in our economic situation. So we need to look at all policies through an economic lens and ensure that people can afford to go to work, to have childcare, to put food on their table. We also need to make sure that I'd like to go continue some of the work I started. So I did support our main streets. That's our small businesses in our small downtowns. I did a lot of work on that I'd love to tell you about if I had more time. That's why I've gotten endorsed by the Association of Washington Business, NFIB, and other business organizations, but also that we need to ensure that we're building out manufacturing. For example, continuing the work that we got so close on, and it is not over yet, on bringing Intelco back. That is something that I'm very passionate about because I know how important those jobs are. My family had those jobs and we need to bring them back here. They're the kind that actually pay a living wage. So all of these systems work together, and I'm really passionate about working hard to ensure that we're building out good jobs and that we are continuing to look for tax relief. I spearheaded a bill that was for sales tax relief on a sales tax holiday. We got it passed off the House. It did not make it through the Senate floor. So I'd love to be able to see that back. I also have been working very hard with the business community to work on our B&O tax structure. It is very unfair right now, and it is hitting our small businesses in a very unfair way. So we got some of that relief passed, and I'm excited about that, but it really needs to be expanded because that was for our very smallest businesses, and those who are ready to hire and create jobs for our community are now impacted too. So we want to continue that work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tasha, same question.
Thank you. Yes. As you mentioned, we really can't impact the inflation since that's more of a federal national thing, but we can impact. What we can do is have meaningful tax reform and relief. We can't, but we through tax cuts and exemptions. So one is the long-term care tax. We should repeal that because that's going to impact our lower income people the most. If people want to participate in such, they should have an option to opt in versus requiring an opting out process. That is set to start in January, and that's going to add a lot of fees to people that can't afford it. We need to roll back the 46-cent gallon tax legislation that is also set to begin in January. We had a $15 billion surplus, which implies we had enough taxes being paid by the community, but rather than offer the people tax cuts, the $15 billion was spent and added more fees to the everyday citizen. So we need to have a good heart to heart about what taxes we actually need. We're looking at already having another surplus. We're at 1.5 billion surplus so far this year. And so and rather than finding ways to spend that money, we need to find ways to put money back in people's pockets so that we can offset the national federal inflation problem that we're seeing that is impacting everybody today. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you both. We are right at 7:55, so I don't want to launch into another question and push us further behind. So I just want to say thank you so much and good luck.
Thank you.
Okay. So next up, we have the final race of the evening, and that's state senator for the 42nd district. And so I'm going, once Zoom lets me take control back of my screen, there we go. I will promote Simon, maybe. And this is where I do the little squirm dance because technology is not working superbly for me. Come on, Zoom. One moment. Okay, so both of you should have received the invitation to be a panelist at this point. Yep, I see both of your hands up. So that was fun. So I think it just kind of kicked me out there. When all else fails, go to a different piece of technology, I think.
Recording in progress.
All right. That's not going to work either.
It worked.
Yeah, I think you got this.
Yeah. So yay for technology. How about that? I outsmarted Zoom this time. Okay. Now I know about YouTube, but I need a drink just after that. So, all right. Welcome, both of you. And thank you for being here. And so as the final candidate race of the night, and I'm going to take a little bit of an opportunity to apologize for that technical difficulty just then. So we're going to add a couple minutes to the end so we can maybe get to one more question that we would not have done because of technology on my part. So same rules apply. Simon, as the incumbent, we're going to have you start off with your 3-minute campaign introduction, and then we'll follow Sharon. So let me get back to my timer. Simon, 3 minutes.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you, Guy. Thank you to the Chamber and the BIAW, the AGC, the Whatcom Realtors, and thank you to everybody that's watching right now. Really appreciate your time. My name is Simon Sefzik, and I'm your local state senator here in the 42nd Legislative District. I've had the honor of getting to represent you down in Olympia and to fight for more common sense government. You know, this is not something that was ever my plan at this stage of life. But I'm running for office because I do believe that Olympia desperately needs a new, energetic, and empathetic voice for our future. I think that we're going down the wrong path. And as a kid who grew up on a farm in Ferndale, taking care of goats and horses and chickens, I was always taught that I had a debt, not only to those who came before me, but to those who are coming after, to work harder each and every day to make sure that our kids and our grandkids are afforded the same opportunities that so many of us had. And I think as we live in Whatcom County, we see that that dream seems to be slipping further and further away. As costs continue to rise and crime increases, people don't necessarily feel safe and they don't feel like they're living in an affordable area anymore. And that's a real problem. That's why I'm running for office, because I genuinely do believe that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they care for and when they love their community. You know, I don't think I need to tell anybody that's watching this that this campaign season has been especially tense and I think at times heated. And I want to be clear that I have nothing personal against Representative Shewmake. I have no personal beef there. I do have an issue with Representative Shewmake's voting record, and I feel that it is my job to illuminate and to show some of the clear differences that we have when it comes to issues relating to affordability, when it comes to public safety, and when it comes to accountability in our government. Because the fact of the matter is that our community faces so many issues. You know, I grew up here in Whatcom County, and I think many of us feel the same way, that we want to be able to grow up here, but things are becoming more and more unaffordable, more and more expensive. The fact that I'm hearing from senior citizens on fixed incomes that can't afford a new tax, they have to choose between paying for a property tax and their medical costs. I'm hearing from young families that have to choose between paying the rent and having to take their kids to a soccer game because of high gas prices. That dream is slipping further and further away. We have so many challenges, and here's what I know. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert to have all the answers, but I do know this. What we can't do is empower the same people that cause many of these problems and expect them suddenly to change and to be able to come up with the solutions. That's why I think we need new leadership. That's why I think every single metric and question that you're going to ask me tonight, Guy, I think is going to show that the current status quo has not worked. And you have the option between a better future or continuing down the wrong status quo. And I trust the voters to make the right decision in this election.
Okay. Thank you, Simon. I do want to make one addition to the list of organizations you mentioned. Whatcom Housing Alliance is also a partner this time. So
thank you to the Whatcom Housing Alliance. I appreciate it.
Sharon, 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, Guy. I'm Sharon Shewmake. I've been serving you the last 4 years as your state representative. I'm also an economist. I'm the only economist in the legislature. I have 2 kids. They're in public schools. And I got to tell you, I didn't run because I have these political ambitions, but because I want to do good work for my community. My priorities are in step with the values of Whatcom County, and that's why the Cascadia Daily News gave me a strong endorsement. So what are these priorities? I believe that women should have the freedom to keep their own reproductive care without government getting in the way. I believe that working people pay enough in taxes and that we can keep the services you need, good schools, protections for folks, but lower your taxes by making sure the super wealthy pay their fair share. I'm not afraid to take on big pharmaceutical companies and have worked to do things like cap the price of essential medicines like insulin and EpiPens. And that's why they, along with the tobacco industry, are dumping money into a campaign against me. Jobs are my bread and butter. I'm an economist and I support the jobs that built Whatcom County, like fishing, farming, and forestry, and the jobs of the future, like solar and biofuels. I'm working to bring green jobs here in solar and biofuels so that we're less impacted by global fuel prices. I'm known for delivering projects to Whatcom County through the state budget, like the Kendall Trail, school funding, roads, bridges, fire stations for rural communities, and money for mental and behavioral health and high-speed internet. Flooding. This is one of my big priorities. When the floods hit, I was out there as soon as it was safe to travel, in Nooksack, Everson, and Sumas. And I'm working every single week to bring people together to find those long-term solutions and to make sure that the folks get the services that they need right now. You'll hear from me over and over again that I want to spend the next years sorting out our broken housing market. And I am excited to go to the Senate and work on that. I plan to look at the regulations one by one, keep things that make sense, but rewrite the things that don't protect our values anymore, that might have made sense in the 1960s, but don't anymore. And I want to hear from you about that. I got a reputation in the legislature for showing up at meetings with a spreadsheet to make sure the numbers add up. And I demand that fiscal accountability. When we talk about the status quo, one of the things that I point out that for the last 20 years, this seat has been held by a Republican senator. Simon Sefzik is the status quo in many ways. I plan to figure out how we protect the things we love about this community and how we can build an economy that works for everyone. Thank you all for hosting this forum.
Okay, thank you both. I feel like I should mention one more time. I mentioned at the very beginning, this is a forum, and since both of you mentioned each other, which is, I guess, okay in the opening statements, I will allow it. I'm not going to give anybody any rebuttal time, but the intention of this is to hear your thoughts, and that's what I'm looking forward to. I have the pleasure and privilege being able to work with both of you. Simon, for just a short little bit, and Sharon over the last couple of years. I think both of you are great humans. And I want to hear what you're going to do to solve some of these problems. And Sharon, you teed it up with housing. And so since it's housing week, we're going to start there. And so the housing question, I think I've read it 6 times tonight. I'm not even sure, but I'm going to read it again for the people that are just tuning in for this one. Whatcom County, as well as most of Washington State, is in a housing crisis that demands action. As this has been further exacerbated by rising interest rates and material costs, this crisis is impacting nearly all levels of the workforce, as well as negatively impacting economic development, as it's difficult to attract and retain workforce for firms to expand or relocate to Washington. Please provide details on actions you would propose that would have a positive impact on housing availability and affordability that you would address in the legislature. Sharon, we'll start with you, 2 minutes.
Thanks, Guy. And thank you for encouraging us to work on positive solutions instead of sniping at each other. I don't think that's what voters want to hear anymore. So I want to spend the next 4 years sorting out our housing market. One of the big things is figuring out how we can build more, we can build out, and we can build up. I think we should do some of both, but we make it really, really hard to build up. So I had a bill last session that would have said every single family home is allowed an attached and a detached accessory dwelling unit or garden cottage by right, with a few exceptions for areas like Whatcom that are environmentally sensitive. That is the first step towards middle housing. If you look at places that have done greater middle housing work, they did ADUs first, and then they were able to build upon that trust that they built. We got it past the House. It died in the Senate. I think that was instructive. And so this year, I think I'll be able to figure out how to get it through the Senate and then hopefully be able to continue to use those relationships in the House. Another big piece of this is condo liability reform. So a couple of years ago, I don't need to tell a lot of the people here, the builders have brought this to me. There were some poorly built condos, there were some lawsuits involved, and the legislature overcorrected. Now it is much too difficult to build condos, which is why we're seeing so many apartments being built. And when condos are being built, they're on the very, very expensive edge. Some of this is getting rid of the 3 years. So you have 4 years where you can sue, and then there's 3 years of tolling. Some of that's getting rid of that tolling. We'll work on that. I have good relationships with folks that maybe don't necessarily agree with that, but we have to continue to make that case. We're also looking at some risk pooling that Vancouver, BC has done. And I'd be happy to talk to folks more about that. I think this is really important because we know, especially for smaller buildings, condos can be that introduction into your first step on that housing ladder. I saw that in Housing Week, there's a great session about incentives to encourage building affordable units and innovative programs like state guarantees to lower capital costs. And finally, I do think that we need to look at adjustments to the GMA. I was just talking to the planner in Ferndale about some ways that we can make that better. And so we've got to figure out how to protect the things we care about while still holding government accountable.
Thank you. Simon, same question, 2 minutes.
Well, great. Well, thank you for the question, Guy. For me, this is a very, very personal topic. You know, I'm a renter here in Whatcom County. I don't own a home. unlike I think pretty much most people in the legislature, in the House and in the Senate. And every year I wonder about my ability to afford not just rent, but to hopefully someday buy a home in Whatcom County. And I know there's thousands of people that live here that are wondering the same thing. I do believe that we need to assess the Growth Management Act. We need to assess the Shoreline Management Act. We need to assess SEPA, because the issue is there's no real streamline right now. And oftentimes you have conflicting regulatory schemes that are very confusing and make it difficult for city planners in areas like Blaine and Ferndale, especially, to know how to build more housing because they don't want to be brought before a hearings board and sued and the city have to pay. And so those are understandable issues that started because of the state legislature. And my fear is that every single year, the legislature, rather than making this process easier, actually ends up adding even more regulatory burdens. You know, anytime that we add another element to the Growth Management Act, that acts as a fee, as a burden on builders and homeowners. The average cost of a home in Whatcom County is about $650,000. For every increase in taxes, about every $1,000, you end up pricing thousands of people out of their homes in Whatcom County. That's a huge issue. That's why I'm proud to be endorsed by the BIAW, the AGC Build PAC, by the Association of Builders and Contractors, by the Laborers Union, and the Operating Engineers Union, because the fact of the matter is that the current approach hasn't worked. Adding more regulations is not the answer. We need to streamline the process. We need to build up. We need to build out. We do need to work at making the cost of housing less and less expensive. And that's why I disagree with the current party's approach to find a way every single year to add a new regulation or a new approach that makes it difficult. I'm opposed to that. I'll work to streamline the process and make cost and building easier for families in Whatcom County.
Okay. Thank you both. Sorry, things are getting a little rummy right now. I've asked the same question so many times. So just to double check, both of you answered that one, right?
It's not Groundhog Day, Guy. It's okay.
It might be. So next question, we're going to go to workforce development. Simon, since you went second last round, you're going to start this one. I'll read it for those of us, or those of you who are watching and just tuning in for this one. Many of the organizations here today are facing a labor shortage, particularly the construction industry, as it is further complicated by large numbers of craftspeople nearing retirement age. How will you address workforce development to fill open positions in many business sectors, particularly construction, and improve economic opportunities for county residents? Simon, 2 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I have the honor of serving on the Senate committee dealing with higher education and workforce development. So this is a conversation that I think about often. And, you know, there's several parts to this. When we talk about workforce development, one of the keys to this is actually the question you just asked us earlier, Guy, and it goes to workforce housing. You know, we have other areas like cities in Leavenworth right now where you have the actual workforce that lives sometimes hours away because there's no affordable housing nearby. So they're driving 3 hours to go work at a restaurant in an area like Leavenworth. And so a big component of this is expanding our housing options so that we can attract a workforce for these key areas. But to those of you that are watching right now, of course, many of you are in business. I probably don't need to tell you, virtually every single sector I've talked to right now is having trouble finding workers, and that increased costs, that increased delays. And so we need expanded partnerships and opportunities. I think we do need to make targeted investments in higher education to attract both more technical training programs for high demand jobs. We need more in the medical field, more nurses, more support staff in the medical field. And so we can have targeted opportunities and we can also decrease the regulatory burden for a lot of these jobs while still maintaining high quality. You know, talking to different workforce developers and large industries here in Whatcom County, of course, there's just a general problem right now with attracting people to even apply to work. And that's because, again, the cost of living is so high, sometimes wages don't necessarily catch up. And so we need to think expansively about the way we're going to address these issues. What I don't think we should do are continue to pass more taxes. There have been 22 new taxes since 2018 that have been passed that affect the working class, that affect the middle class, those in lower income categories. They're the ones that get hurt most by this. And that's one of the reasons our workforce has been struggling so much recently. I'm opposed to those new efforts. And I think instead there are different investments we can make to expand our workforce.
Thank you. Sharon, same question, 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Guy. Jobs are a good thing. It's an opportunity to feed your family, but also ways to grow and feel confidence about, use your little bit of time here on earth. As an economist, jobs are my bread and butter. I fought for a wide range of jobs with a particular focus on good, well-paid union jobs and our small businesses, which is why I worked to lower the B&O tax for over 130,000 small businesses. I'm continuing to work on reopening in telco and potentially bringing back some of these great jobs that we know sustain so many people here. Good jobs in manufacturing high quality aluminum is important to our national defense. We also know that to get good jobs, we need to have a trained workforce. And to do that, we need to make sure that we have good schools. So that means K through 12. That also means including continuing partnerships with places like BTC. I've been on a lot of tours of high schools lately, and something they always show me is the 3D printers and the welding shop. I think that's fantastic, and we need to continue to build on those school centers. We also know that housing is critical, but so is childcare. So is elder care. And these are some of the things that broke most in the pandemic. We are hearing from places that traditionally hire women that it's really hard when they don't have secure childcare, when they have an elder person in their family that they're taking care of. We're hearing from workers that this is becoming more and more important. So we know that the marketplace for highly skilled workers is tight right now. We know we need to get more people into apprenticeship programs. We also know that women and parents can show up by having that early learning, childcare, K through 12, and affordable housing all have to be part of this mix. I really think of this as an economy that works for everyone, where the people that want to hire folks can find the people that they want to hire, but they're also mentoring that next generation. And then the people that want to offer up their labor can go ahead and find those jobs knowing they'll be protected, that they'll be paid appropriately, and their dollar will go far enough to be able to support their family.
Okay. Thank you. So since you teed up childcare, let's go there. In Whatcom and Skagit counties, there are currently only enough openings for 1/3 of the children, according to Child Care Aware of Washington. Since the pandemic, we have seen a substantial number of childcare facilities close, making it even more difficult for parents to find available and affordable childcare. When parents have challenges accessing childcare, parents must scramble to find alternative options, with some parents leaving the workforce to care for their child or children. This is particularly challenging for women and families of color, further creating inequities. This also becomes a workforce issue for businesses. What would you propose to realistically improve availability and affordability of childcare in Washington State? Sharon, we will start 2 minutes with you.
Thank you, Guy. And first, I'll be voting for Prop 5 to expand early education and childcare here at home. I actually helped connect some of the early authors of that legislation with legislative leaders, and I started my very first campaign talking about the incredible economics of early learning and childcare. It's good for kids, it's good for parents, saves us money on things like special ed and even incarceration. But as you said, we also know it's essential for businesses. So I've been working on this. I'm not new to this issue. In the past legislative sessions, I got money to help the Boys and Girls Club buy a center when that center was planning on closing, leaving a whole bunch of families out in the lurch. I got funding for the Northwest Center for Childcare to help new childcare centers start up or expand and really encourage entrepreneurship from people that do want to take care of children and have those skills, but may not have known where all the grants, where the buildings are, some of the business aspects of it. I was also instrumental in helping pass the Fair Start for Kids Act, which increased the subsidies because they were so low that providers just couldn't make it work, and also increased the eligibility. We know that those first 5 years of early brain development is critical. We know that having women out of the workplace for 5 years instead of just a few, 1 or 2, really impacts their career and is part of that gender wage gap. You want to talk about workforce, we have to also address childcare. I also voted for money for our local schools to stay open after COVID. We had to get schools open, and locally they got $7.5 million from our enrollment stabilization. This was a standalone bill for our schools that was just critical to get passed, and our superintendents told it was so important. I'll be continuing to do this work. I think that we should start to see childcare. We recognize that the workday doesn't end at 3, even if the schools do. And so we need to figure out ways to accommodate parents of all income brackets, not just those that can afford to pay it or that can afford to leave the workday at 3 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Simon, same question, 2 minutes.
Well, guys, you mentioned, as Representative Shewmake mentioned, this is a serious issue in Whatcom County. I mean, I talked to a group, a family actually yesterday that moved out of the state. They're back here right now because they found new jobs, but they literally moved out of Washington state because of the difficulty in Whatcom County of being able to find childcare options and the competition that exists of, sometimes it's cheaper if one person in the family ends up staying home at times because of just how expensive childcare is in Whatcom County right now. So that is a real issue. One of the issues that makes this complicated, of course, is that there are oftentimes a lot of rules, and of course, a lot of those rules should exist, but they make it difficult for those in rural areas, especially, to have smaller in-home child care options and early learning options for children. And so there's also a disparity, Guy, you touched on part of the disparity, but there's also a disparity that exists right now when you have childcare options that exist in more urban areas like Bellingham or even Ferndale, but they may not necessarily exist out in the east part of the county or different parts of the North County. And so I think we need to not only make sure that our education system is provided and well-funded in K through 12, but we need to make sure that we're looking at different options to make it easier for both larger facilities and smaller facilities at the state level. And I think there's a number of different ways that could be done. More funding is part of it, but it's not the entire answer. I think we do need to go by sort of regulation by regulation and see some of the things. Again, part of this has been exacerbated through the COVID pandemic, but see if there are areas where we could make it easier for a lot of times those smaller providers to be able to give those options to families and to students. This is a critical need in our community, and I think there's a lot of steps that can be taken. I'm mainly focused on obviously the statewide level, but there's also local decisions that can be made to help improve this situation as well. And so all options are on the table.
Okay. So we are just past our time, but since I had the whole Zoom thing happen, we're going to have one final question. And as I mentioned, I think it was the last race. I don't know. A topic near and dear to me is the economy. And so, Simon, we're going to start it off with you. So I'll read the question and you'll have 2 minutes. The U.S. has seen inflation rates that we haven't experienced in over 40 years. While the state legislature can't implement fiscal policy to potentially reduce its impact on our citizens and businesses throughout the state, what potential actions could be made in Olympia do you feel would help lessen the financial burden on families and businesses in Washington and Whatcom County? Simon, again, 2 minutes. We'll start with you.
Well, thank you for the question. And I am going to note, I'm sad then that we're not going to be able to touch on public safety, because public safety absolutely does affect both people's day-to-day lives. It does affect the price of goods in Whatcom County. When you have people that are committing retail theft at unprecedented levels and there's no punishment for it because of the anti-police laws that got passed in 2021, that increases the cost of living and it increases the price of goods all across Whatcom County. So we have to be clear that there's an economic impact to crime and public safety. So if we can't get to that question, I'll plug that. But in terms of what can be done to reduce inflation, there's a lot of steps that can be taken. Washington had a $16 billion budget surplus this year. Washington state was also one of the only states in the entire country to not have a single penny of that go to tax relief this year. I understand there was a B&O tax relief that will be in effect in January of 2023, but nothing this year. And so we missed a huge opportunity to not having any tax relief. I think my opponent and I are both on the same page, actually, that we should reduce the sales tax here in the state by 1%, but we haven't seen any legislation to do that in the past 4 years out of this district. And so there are steps that can be taken to reduce taxes and reduce those fees. I'm opposed to the income tax on capital gains that got passed that also increases the cost. And so again, while there's no steps that can necessarily be addressed by the Washington state legislature to address inflation overall, we can certainly reduce costs on families. That's why, again, when the cost of gas is going to rise by about 46 cents in January because of the Climate Commitment Act that got passed, that's going to impact people's pocketbooks. That makes it harder for people in middle and lower income categories to get by every single day. And so the attack on small business that has grown has to stop. And we need to empower those in the middle class that built this country and give them the same opportunities that so many others have had to grow their business, to grow their family, and to succeed in this economy.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I was disappointed that we couldn't address the the public safety. It would have taken me all the time just to read the question. So Sharon, same question, 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Guy. And I will say that everyone cares about public safety. This isn't a partisan issue. And I'll go ahead and answer the question that was asked. So first, we did do broad-based tax relief with the BNO tax relief. That's going to expand access to, that's going to make it a lot easier for small businesses to expand, to be built. And we put in some resources there for them as well, some technical assistance that I think is really important. Going forward, there'll also be the working families tax rebate, which will help those at the very, those that need it the most. Looking forward, we also have the tax structure working group that is doing careful work on trying to figure out how do we maintain spending in K-12 systems, the things that we think are really important, while cutting taxes for the little guy. But I'll speak directly. Inflation has been tough. For too many people, these increases mean they have to choose between gas or food or bills. And of course, we're seeing it in the housing market. I'm hearing from people at the doors about 50% rent increases. This is unsustainable, and we have to figure out how to build more homes to give these people more options. As for, we cannot stop the war in Ukraine. I don't control the Federal Reserve. Thank you for making that point about fiscal policy. There are still some supply chain hiccups that we did do some work on and we can continue to do work on. One of the things that we saw is a shortage of commercial drivers. You know what? They needed access to restrooms. They needed safe places to sleep at night. And so I co-sponsored bills and did some of that work to do that. The biggest piece, though, again, is housing, and we do have some control over this. We have to make sure if cities are allowing for the private market to build more housing. We can do more on the public market, but it's really expensive, and we're just not going to get to where we need to go with just using publicly funded housing. We shouldn't make it harder or more expensive to build housing in cities. We need to look at the rules around things like HOAs. We need to look back at the first-time homebuyer program, and we can create financing projects to do things like build ADUs while allowing the state to take on some of the risk, do some state guarantees, which gets one more family some rental income and another person a place to live.
Okay. So we are just a touch over as promised. Again, sorry about the Zoom little screw up there. Technology failed us again. Thank you both for being here, and thank everyone for watching. Since public safety did come up, I do think it's an important plug for something that we're doing with the chamber. We have a current business survey out that will be concluding on October 28th. Measuring the impact of public safety and crime, as well as just measuring how business is doing. So if you're watching this and you want to have access to that survey, if you were a business or an employee of a business, reach out and we'll love to send you that. So yeah, with that, thank you so much for a wonderful evening. Good luck to all the candidates over the next few weeks. I know that the 3 or 4 weeks prior to election night is just, it's exhausting and it's rough, and I know everyone's tired. And so again, I just want to thank you all for taking time to be here. I think we had every person we asked was here, so that's great to get that kind of participation and engagement. Civics in our community is so important, and it's why we offer this in partnership with the organizations that have been mentioned, to provide this as an opportunity, because we need to get voter participation up. We need people to care a little bit more. And so that's why we offer this opportunity. And I just want to take one final time to say thank you to our partners in this forum that help build the questions and help promote the event. And so we've got AGC of Washington State, we've got the Building Industry Alliance of Whatcom County, the Whatcom Housing Alliance, which is a program of sustainable connections, and the Whatcom County Association of Realtors. And so on behalf of the chamber, thank you so much for a great evening. Have a wonderful rest of your week, or whenever you're watching this, probably in between now and when you turn in your ballot. So ballots are due November 8th, correct? Yeah.
That is correct. If there's one date I know, it's that one.
Yeah. So wonderful. Thank you both. I'm going to stop the recording at this point and end the meeting, and I just appreciate everyone being here.
Thanks, Guy.
Thank you, Guy. Appreciate it. Have a good one. Sharon, your background still looks better than mine.